Welcome everyone. The webinar will begin in just a second and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez, and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this conversation. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select both panelists and attendees when responding so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the conversation to respond to the questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered for the webinar. And we are live streaming this conversation on our Facebook Live as well. Finally, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Finally, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars. Later today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we have another Learning Loss Recovery Challenge webinar entitled Family Resource Centers, a Key to Supported Families and Thriving Communities. Next week on May 18th, we have a doubleheader starting with a funder-to-funder conversation, utilizing learning science to reach every readers, and Parents Speak Ready for Bold Change in K-12 Education at 3 p.m. Finally, on May 25th, we have another partner webinar at 12:30 Eastern Time as well. Joining you now is Jenny Atkinson, consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra, and I'd like to welcome all of you to today's Crucible of Practice Salon. This webinar series provides a deep dive exploration into how community coalitions are approaching and moving the work to improve early school success prospects of children from economically challenged families, neighborhoods, and communities. Our goal is to illuminate the factors and dynamics that combine to propel progress. In each Crucible of Practice Salon, we hear from a community lead and other members of that coalition or community who speak directly to how they're doing this work and how stakeholders are partnering together to create momentum and synergy. We see these Crucible of Practice Salons as an opportunity to dig deep into the work that communities are doing and make more visible not just the what, but also the how, with the goal of learning more about what it takes to be successful, as well as how to replicate models that are working. We believe that sharing what we've learned and gathering in conversation together will lead us all to do better work, get better faster, and grow to do this work at scale. I'm so excited about today's webinar, Big Lift Inspiring Summers, Literacy, Learning, and Fun. On the next slide, you'll see who our panelists will be today. We're going to be joined by Gina Quiney, Christine Thorstensen, Dolly Goyle, Jennifer LaRock, and Corrine Risley in San Mateo County, California. We'll hear first from our moderator, Gina Quiney. Gina is a senior legislative aide to Supervisor Carol Groom and has worked on early education and policy, early childhood education and policy related to children and families for over 12 years. She has been involved in the planning and implementation of the Big Lift since its inception and continues to serve on the core leadership team as well as oversee its operation at the County of San Mateo. Prior to her role in Supervisor Carol Groom's office, she worked on civic engagement and program coordination in the nonprofit sector. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you, Jenny. Good morning from San Mateo County, California, and good afternoon to those on the East Coast. My name is Gina Quiney, and I am a senior legislative aide for County Supervisor Carol Groom. and have worked primarily on San Mateo County's collective impact early learning and literacy initiative called the Big Lift, which you will learn much more about today. I'd like to introduce my colleagues joining me today from the San Mateo County Libraries. We have Deputy Director Corinne Risley and Library Services Manager for Youth and Family Services, Dolly Goyle. From the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, we have Director of Early Childhood Development, Christine Thorsensen. And from Jefferson Elementary School District, one of our 7 school district partners involved in the Big Lift, we have District Administrator Jennifer LaRock. So we are very excited to share with you today the strengths and the lessons learned from holding a successful in-person summer program in summer 2020. It was no easy feat, but we are very proud that we pulled it off, and it served the students so well. Not only did they benefit from a fun, creative, and safe program, but we as the organizers learned about the challenges and opportunities in our collective leadership model. While we hope the health and safety challenges of last year will not reach that level again, we do walk away with learnings that will continue to apply as we move forward, and we hope you too will learn some nuggets to take back to your communities. So on that note, if we could move to the next slide, we'd like to begin with a quote from a parent whose daughter participated last year. She said, "Inspiring summers gave my daughter her life back." This quote is our guiding light, and this is why we do the hard work, even when it's hard and seems insurmountable. So one of the components of Big Lift Inspiring Summers is mindfulness that we incorporate into the afternoon session, which is led by San Mateo County Libraries. Before we launch into our presentation today, I would like to invite Corinne and Dolly from San Mateo County Libraries to introduce our Inspiring Summers and begin with a mindful exercise to give you a taste of what that summer experience is like. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Gina. As she mentioned, our summer program supports the whole child and includes yoga, mindfulness, and social emotional regulation strategies critical to stress reduction and emotional awareness, skills that have come to seem even more essential as we've gone through this pandemic. We're going to start off with a real activity, one of our favorites we do with kids in the program, and Dolly is going to lead us through it.
Hi, everyone. This exercise that we're about to do is reflected in one of the 5 themes in the afternoon curriculum. And this in particular focuses on the brain and breathing. So I hope you can enjoy this, especially those in the East Coast. Everyone knows that our brain communicates with our bodies, but few realize how much our bodies talk to our brains. When we take slow, deep breaths, our bodies are telling our brains, it's all good. So everyone, if you can please hold up your right hand. And as you breathe in, we want to trace up the outside of your finger. And as you breathe out, trace down the inside and continue with the hold hand. So breathe in, out, in, out, in, out, one more. Wow. Wow, I hope everyone is feeling centered now, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Gina.
Thank you, Dolly and Corinne. Now that we're all in a peaceful space, let us move on and tell you a little more about the Big Lift and Inspiring Summers. So if you could move to the next slide. I want to start with some history and context to how this, our project in San Mateo County, the Big Lift, evolved. Back starting in 2008, we had an advisory body in the county with representatives from government and business, education, and nonprofit sectors that advocated for the needs of children, youth, and their families. This advisory body was called the Peninsula Partnership Leadership Council. All of our organizations that are here today were represented in that council, and it was both funded and led by our 3 backbone agencies, which are the County of San Mateo, the Office of Education, and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. That year in 2008, the Peninsula Partnership Leadership Council adopted a Bill of Rights for Children, Youth, and Families, which identified 10 basic rights that all children are entitled to in our county, regardless of life circumstances. This included the right to access a 21st century education that promotes success in life, future careers, and a lifelong love of learning. Next slide, please. We learned that although San Mateo County was in the heart of Silicon Valley and a wealthy county, only 50% of our kids were reading proficiently by 3rd grade. When looking at kids of color, that number grows to a very disconcerting 73%. If kids are not reading proficiently by 3rd grade, it gets harder and more costly to catch them up. A reading gap becomes an opportunity and an equity gap. And we, as the leaders of San Mateo County at the time, were not okay with these statistics. So we decided to look at how we could address this. Next slide, please. You can move to the next slide. We knew that it would take a big focused effort with a wide tent to begin to move the needle on this reading proficiency gap. There was no one answer to the solution and to get kids reading proficiently. So in 2013, we convened county leaders to develop a collective impact model to address the issue. As you see here, a collective impact approach is the commitment of a group of important actors from different sectors to work towards a common agenda for solving a specific social problem. Collective impact is not necessary for every problem and every situation. As you'll see in the next slide, there are 2 approaches. Oh, we lost the slide. If it's a simple, straightforward problem that usually involves a known solution and maybe 1 or 2 partnerships, that would be an example, such as addressing COVID-19 is actually a great example of that. We know what the answer is. We knew the health guidance. We knew a vaccine was needed. While it was a huge issue, the answers were known. 3rd grade reading proficiency was complicated to tackle because there are a variety of issues involved. There is literacy, there is classroom, there are years that are leading up to 3rd grade, and there is everything that is happening in the environment that can impact a child's learning. So with that in mind, we knew that we were going to need a huge group of people from various sectors looking at this issue and looking at the different pieces involved. Now we can move to the next slide. So what are the key aspects involved in collective impact efforts? Well, first of all, there's a common agenda. For us, it was getting kids to read proficiently by 3rd grade. It required backbone support organizations. As I mentioned previously, the County of San Mateo, the Office of Education, and the Silicon Valley Community Foundation were already partnering to address advocacy around children and youth issues. So it was natural for them to evolve into a backbone support. And we included the San Mateo County Libraries as the program became more fleshed out. In order to involve 3 and now 4 backbone support organizations and over 200 community partners, which involves everyone from the business sector, from elected officials, from nonprofit organizations and clergy, it requires continuous communication. There are a lot of pieces and it is not easy work at all. However, it is very rewarding. We are all mutually reinforcing activities. So in addition to the communication, the work that is being done with preschool, with summer interventions, with family engagement interventions, they all build upon each other towards that one common agenda. And finally, in order to measure our progress and make sure that we are making an impact, we must have shared measurement systems that we all participate in and that we continue to track for continuous improvement. Next slide. I'd like to about the big lift. Go ahead.
When I grow up, I want to be a teacher, a ballerina, a doctor. I want to be a fireman, an artist. I can be anything I want to be. My favorite thing about school is having new friends. My favorite is Oreos and apple juice. I know a couple different languages. I like doing math. 100 plus 100 makes 200. I know that dinosaurs lived in the desert a long time ago. My favorite thing to learn is stories. My favorite books are sharks. I like doing yoga at school because it feels good. I like being here at school. It helped us get ready. I'm excited to go to the big lift.
Thank you. So we love that video because it brings the faces of the kids to life. What I did not mention before is that in the past, we've been 6 years in, we've had 6 years of kids in the big lift. And as I mentioned, there have been over 4,000 kids over that time. It's probably closer, when this video was made, it was at over 4,000. Now it's closer to around 10,000, I would estimate. And the kids that participate in the big lift are from families that make an average of $40,000 a year. Compared to, this may sound shocking, but the area median income in San Mateo County is about $150,000 a year. So these are very economically disadvantaged children that we're really trying to give the boost that every child should have, and just trying to close that opportunity gap. So the question, how do we do it? Let us go a little deeper into what the program is. As I mentioned before, there are, you can go to the next slide. There are 4 backbone agencies that lead the effort. They all play a different role. The County of San Mateo has been the major funder of the big lift for the past 6 years. San Mateo County Office of Education and San Mateo County Libraries really provide the program expertise that ensures that we are using evidence-based strategies and that we are tracking data and making sure that our program is in fact working and doing what it sets out to do. And the Silicon Valley Community Foundation has been a major partner from the beginning as the advocacy lead, as a funder of the big lift, and as the program management piece going forward. And so these 4 organizations work very closely. They are represented by those of us here today. And it is critical that we have, as I mentioned, the continuous communication, because each organization has its own structures and processes, and it has served us really well, especially in this past year, as you will see, to have our relationships and to have this partnership in place. So through the backbone support and continuous communication, as I mentioned before, we provide mutually reinforcing activities. These are our, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. These are our 4 interventions based on the Annie EKC Foundation framework and the data that says these interventions in the years leading up to 3rd grade can and will make a difference. So our 4 interventions are continuous family engagement, both in the summer and in the preschool and K through 2nd grade years leading up to 3rd grade. It's 2 years of high quality preschool. We have 4 years of inspiring summer experiences for the rising kindergarten through rising 3rd grade students, and attendance, ensuring that families and kids understand the importance of attendance in preschool through 3rd grade. And this all builds upon each other to reach our goal of getting kids to 80% of kids to read proficiently by 3rd grade. And as mentioned before, we use our data systems and evaluation, including an external evaluation with RAND Corporation, to ensure that we are achieving what we set out to do. And now with that, I'd like to pass the mic to Christine Thorstensen to share a little more about each of our pillars, as we call them.
Hey, thank you, Gina. I'm just going to go into a very brief overview for each pillar to give you a little deeper understanding of what we do with each of them, and a little bit about how we had to pivot this year over COVID and some of the things we learned. So I would just ask that we go to the next slide, and I will keep it brief because each one of these pillars could actually be its own webinar if we went into too much depth. So the foundational pillar for the program is providing children 2 years of high quality preschool. We know the importance of pre-K. We know that when children arrive in kindergarten ready, that really reduces that opportunity gap and really, helps them to move towards where we want to be for 3rd grade reading scores. So we've taken as a core aspect of our program, we fund Big Lift funded slots. So we've expanded access for children in San Mateo County. And we've also funded enhancement to existing slots that allow the day to be longer, allow the day to extend further into the school year. Extend the school year, and really ensure that the pre-K that our students are attending is high quality. So we do a lot of technical assistance and coaching throughout the year with the County Office of Education provides that. And then we do a lot of quality measurements through our programs. So we do the Eckers and class scores. And when our children enter kindergarten, we measure with the Brigance, their kindergarten readiness scores. Over COVID, of course, opening our pre-K programs was a real challenge, but we are really proud of the work that our pre-Ks did this year. They were all open throughout the year. They were all supporting families, and they all really used this year to learn how to deeply engage individually with students and families and really provide targeted, personalized learning. So I think there were some learnings that they got through that, which they're going to continue with as we move forward and more children are back on campus. So next slide, please. Our next pillar is family engagement. We are deeply committed to our parents as our primary partners. They are such a part of our program, and we respect them and engage them, and we need them to be part of what we're doing. So we focus most of our family engagement strategies in the pre-K years and over summer. We start with Raising a Reader program and Raising a Reader Plus, which offers additional parent workshops. We use a program called Ready for K that you might be familiar with, which is a texting program that engages parents and children's learning throughout the year. And this year we were able to use our Ready for K texting program to provide not only academic support and encouragement, but social emotional support throughout the difficulties of the pandemic. We also have parent cafes that operate within our programs, and we have a parent Play to Grow series. So we've got a number of different ways that we can touch points for parents and that they can engage with our program. We continue our parent engagement over the summer, ensuring that parents are a key part. We'll hear about our summer COVID experience when we couldn't be in touch personally with parents, but we still kept up the family engagement. One of the neat things we found with our parent engagement with COVID this year was because parents couldn't be on campus as they would normally have been with drop-offs and pickups and more face-to-face time, our programs pivoted to connecting digitally through Zoom calls and other Google Meets and things. And the feedback we've gotten from both parents and the programs is that that entry into the home for them and the ability to have conversations one-on-one has really deepened the family connection. And I know most of my programs plan to continue to offer that as they move forward. Next slide, please. So our third pillar is attendance. And we use behavioral science and positive messaging to really encourage students to be in school. And we start early. So we start our attendance messaging in pre-K, which is a bit unusual, but we know that if we lay the foundation and families understand the importance of being in school every day on time, that continues up as they move into elementary school, and then will continue for the remainder of their life. And we have gained a tremendous amount of, or prevented a number of absences, is perhaps the best way to say it, over the years we've been doing this. What we do is send out letters that provide updates and help parents to understand their actual attendance levels. But when COVID hit, actual messaging around attendance became very challenging when there was not in-person school. But we continued to do the outreach with our attendance strategy, but instead of messaging around being in class as the focus, our message is really focused on ensuring that our families were well and had access to resources and knew how to connect if they were in need of assistance. We also used our letters because we actually go, like, we use good old snail and mail, real mail that gets sent to the home. And for families who are really hard to reach through email or texting, those actual letters were really, really helpful this year. And so we used our outreach to reach hard to reach families and make sure we were connecting them to services. And our last pillar is the one we're going to talk about and focus on for the rest of the day. So if you move to the next slide. And that is summer. And all I'm going to say about summer is, well, why did we include summer with all of these other pieces? And we just know that summer is a critical time for learning. It's a critical time to prevent that summer slide and learning loss over the summer. But what we also know is that kids with access to resources typically have access to great summers. So they get to go to really engaging, academically focused or super in other science and music and art and drama and all those different really enriching programs that help build those foundational skills. And we wanted to make sure that every child had access to that kind of high quality program, no matter whether they had access to resources or not. So we made summer a key part of our program. And I'm going to pass it on now to our library folks, to Corinne and Dolly, to then share with us about the summer program structure.
Thanks, Christine. Next slide, please. So we are excited to share with you the details of our Big Lift Inspiring Summers program now. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just an illustration of how summer and our Inspiring Summers program truly is dependent on collective impact and our partners coming together. Each has a role in the program success, and we really depend on each other for it to work. So here's an example of what it looks like with our school district at the very top. And then we have our Silicon Valley Community Foundation partner. The Bay Area Discovery Museum is another partner who provides our afternoon research-based STEAM curriculum. The program would not be able to move forward without the support of the county and Metro K funding. And we also really rely on the support from the San Mateo County Office of Education, who administer the enrollment for our camps and also monitor attendance and provides with attendance reports at the end of the program. Second Harvest Food Bank is also an instrumental partner who supports us with snacks for our program for our students. And of course, the library, we're here to oversee the program, coordinate all of the supplies, and administer the afternoon curriculum. And finally, Bell Excel, who is the source of our morning academic curriculum and framework for the program. Next slide. So this chart will give you a better idea of the changes we've made throughout the first 4 summers of the program. In March 2016, we found out we'd have the opportunity to serve 800 children in the Big Lift Inspiring Summers program. And we had a little under 4 months to plan the program that first year, which included staffing, recruitment, training, curriculum development, and supply ordering. For our second summer in 2017, we actually started planning in October 2016, just 3 months after the program ended. We built on the curriculum from our first year and then added an additional grade. We also expanded the program to add 4 more sites and served 500 more children. Now, around the time we started planning for our third summer, we found out we had lost a bit of our federal funding and we would need to scale the program down a bit. However, we were still able to serve more children at more sites in 2018 and 2019 than we had in our first summer. Our goal is really to focus on getting all of our kids at third grade and maximizing reading at grade level. And we really want to invest as much as we can to make sure that this can happen. Next slide.
So Big Lift Inspiring Summers has mostly been a 4-week program throughout its history that we offer to 7 school districts in the county. As Dolly just went over with you, in 2018, 9 schools participated in the program across the 7 districts. The all-day program runs 5 days a week, and library staff work with you throughout the day. In the mornings, staffing also includes credentialed teachers to really support and breathe life into the academic focus in those mornings. They follow an evidence-based model developed by the national nonprofit BLIS. Each site is staffed with an instructional coach who helps conduct pre and post program assessments, analyze formative assessment data to identify children's learning gaps, review lesson plans, and regularly observe classrooms to support teachers in implementing data-driven differentiated instruction. In the afternoon, the program shifts to hands-on STEAM enrichment experiences. As we recently just experienced together, we also lead the kids in daily mindfulness activities developed with a phenomenal nonprofit called Head Start that works to combat toxic stress through their yoga curriculum. And to see some of that in action is so powerful. We recognize that students cannot focus on learning if they're hungry, so we provide healthy meals throughout the summer, serving breakfast, lunch, and 2 snacks every day. In the mornings, we also invite parents and siblings to join us for breakfast and participate with us in family engagement activities. Next slide, please. The afternoons are rooted in a framework that's based on the key research-backed elements of environments that promote the development of creativity. This approach really highlights the overlaps in child development, traditional curriculum discipline, and research in creative thinking. Bay Area Discovery Museum and Center for Childhood Creativity experts and researchers developed our curriculum to ensure that the afternoons are child-directed, that they're risk-friendly and kids feel safe to take risks, that they're emotionally tuned to what's going on in the lives the kids we're working with, that we're providing active experiences with full body movement, that we're offering time flexible experiences that adjust based on interest levels of energy in the room, and that we're providing exploratory experiences. We ask staff to embrace this approach and be learners and experimenters along with the youth, as well as to create and manage an inclusive and engaging learning environment. Through our activities, we encourage our staff to continue to explore innovative ways to combine science with art, engineering with music, and theater with math to motivate, inspire, and engage children to drive their own learning. Staff intentionally teach growth mindset thinking, which is critical in the spaces with youth. It's also critical with our partners, and it really undergirds everything that we do to build a culture where mistakes and failures are opportunities to learn. Next slide, please.
Okay, so let's talk about staffing, because we couldn't have a program without staff to help support it. So our Inspiring Summers program is staffed with teachers hired by the school district partners to lead the morning curriculum. And the library hires interns to support the morning for a portion of it. And we also lead the afternoon program. This program was also an opportunity to provide a meaningful professional development opportunity for college students, focus on careers in education and working with children. We even had students who were interested in psychology and that kind of focus. So we held targeted recruitments at local universities and community colleges through emails, attending career fairs, flyers throughout the communities, to local schools and local school sites. And we most recently partnered with Stanford, who promoted the recruitment for us through their local STEP internship program and also other networks. Really a great pipeline for us to reach the right kind of people for the program. When we first started hiring, our goal was to hire 118 interns, and now we hire over 170. And so we really rely on the support for our county HR to support us as well, because those are a lot of staff. Our staff not only reflect the communities that they serve, but they're also bilingual, which is very helpful for our English language learners. And additionally, our interns have such a positive experience in the program. We typically have a 60% return rate because they do want to see their students year after year as they grow throughout the program. Next slide.
Thank you, Dolly and Kareen, for sharing about the Inspiring Summers program. Now we're going to pivot and have a panel discussion among my colleagues here to get a better sense of what the experience was like last summer. You can actually turn off, I think, the slideshow at this point so that you can see all the panelists as we discuss. I invite anyone from the audience, if questions come up, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. And after we complete the panel, we will come back to questions and open them up to the audience. So the first question I would like to ask Christine, can you set the stage for us and take us back to last year and walk us through how BLIS 2020 came to be?
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, it has certainly been quite a year. So looking back a whole year from now, it's sort of hard to believe that we've been more than a year since we were at this decision point. So we found ourselves last year in March when the shelter-in-place orders came down, when our schools were forced to close to in-person learning, having to make some very, very tough decisions. We had been planning, of course, like I'm sure many people on this call, we had been planning for a full summer camp, Inspiring Summers experience. We had registration open. We had hundreds of families already registered. We were well on our way to recruitment and staffing and planning out schedules and supplies. And suddenly, we didn't know what was happening. And we were just like everybody else at that time. Every day was a new set of instructions. Every day was a new adventure, something else to figure out. And so when you're in a collective impact project, that just adds another layer of complexity to this whole situation, because there were 4 entities plus 7 school districts who were all involved in this planning. So I will tell you, Gina, it was a challenge, but we came as a group and really looked deeply at our program. We looked very carefully at the health and safety guidelines that were currently in place. We were staying up to date with those on a day-to-day basis, and we were seeking advice. And we really thought, can we put together an in-person program right now? We asked ourselves, and we came down to 4 essential questions. And these were the 4 things that guided us in our decisions. So we first said, safety is our #1 priority. So would it be possible to operate a program safely? That was an unknown, but we knew that had to be our #1. Could we keep our children and our staff safe? So could we do it? Secondly, we had developed a high quality summer program, and we did not want to offer children anything less than that. So given our current circumstances and constraints, would we still be able to offer a high quality program? Then we needed to carefully consider the capacity of our partners. So both the capacity of the library and their staffing and their needs, as well as the capacity of all of our school districts. And could we do it in the midst of shutting down for a pandemic? Would it be possible? And then lastly, we had to really think about what the financial implications were for this. This is a publicly funded program, and we needed to ensure that if we were to go down that road, that this was a fiscally responsible use of the funds and that we weren't going to be spending crazy money to make something happen. So we had to ask ourselves those 4 questions. And we really felt we could So we thought, I think we can do it safely. I think we can keep the quality up. Our districts agreed they had capacity and we could do it within our budget. I often say a little bit, ignorance was bliss. And you may hear us refer to BLIS, because that is our short term, that's our nickname for our program that we use internally, Big Lift Inspiring Summers. So it really truly was a little bit of ignorance is bliss. We weren't really sure what we were getting into, and we had no idea that the pandemic would carry on for so long and we would not be reopening schools. So not knowing that, but thinking where we were, we decided, we took it to our leadership team. And our leadership team was very courageous, and they were really, very brave. And they said, our families need this. Our kids need this, our schools need this, and we're going to make it happen. And they stood behind us and they gave us all the support we needed and allowed us to move ahead and put together an in-person program. So from a professional standpoint, it was an incredible challenge, but it was also incredibly, and I think everyone on this call, all of us from the program would agree, just an incredibly rewarding experience. So Gina, that was kind of our summer last year. So that's how we got started back last March.
Thank you, Christine. And I'll add a small anecdote. Christine really did take it on because she had just transitioned into the role at this time too. So it really took everyone coming together on that one. So thank you, Christine, for sharing. Now, Corinne and Dolly, what changes were made to the program structure due to COVID in order to address those priorities that Christine mentioned?
I will take that. So the first thing we did, as Christine mentioned, was really look at the program and what we could provide. So we modified to have a half-day program. We figured that would be the most safe for our families, and primarily utilize the Bell Excel curriculum, which is the typical morning curriculum, with a sprinkle of our afternoon STEAM curriculum that our facilitators led in the classrooms. We also wanted to ensure that we still continue with providing meals to our students. So we did offer grab and go meals for students for breakfast and lunch for multiple days throughout all of our sites. We had planned to have a special kind of family engagement STEM kit series that we were going to do in the live program. So instead, we made those take home for all families. We at the library recorded pre-recorded videos, instruction on how to use it on YouTube, and then provided those links to the families as well in case the written instructions, which were also English and Spanish, were not clear enough, so families could engage that way. And something new that we added that was a very positively received were, we call the well calls, the wellness calls. So we would have our staff check in and make calls to our families to see if they had everything they needed at that time. And it could range from the Inspiring Summers program itself, but also anything else that they could be in need of. So we fielded calls on just local community resources, the internet connectivity. A lot of parents were asking about the school enrollment for next year, which we deferred to our school partner staff. We asked them if they utilized the STEM kits and how that was going, and just if anything we could offer them. If they had questions about the health and safety, our staff were able to provide those. And we made those calls at different times of the day to reach parents. So I would say between 3 and 7 p.m. to just reach everyone as easily as possible, because they were not allowed on site. And that was something really different this year or that year. Additionally, we typically have an assessment that we have in person for our students. So we weren't able to have that this year, but we did provide parent surveys, which again, we integrated into the wellness calls and also emailed out to families to get feedback on the program. And of course, as Christine mentioned, very, very thorough health and safety protocols, had those letters on hand for any COVID incidences. And our school district partners too, as well, increased communication through websites and newsletters that went out to families, both online and paper, depending on the school district. I would also add one more thing, our staffing. We did provide our college interns as well to support our school district staff in the mornings. And so that was a different change. They're usually there all day, but they were there specifically to support our teachers.
Thank you, Dolly. Jennifer, You have been leading this program on the ground in Daly City since it first started in 2016. Tell us about your experiences last summer and how a scholar's experience was impacted by COVID.
Sure thing. Thanks, Gina. I think if you were to ask an alumni scholar, my guess is that they'd say nothing changed, honestly, except that they were maybe a little more happy to be in camp this summer because they had been home for a while. Besides the morning check-in and a little extra hand washing from their perspective, everything that happened inside the classroom was exactly the same. They had a shortened day, but like Dolly mentioned, the brilliant thinking of the county library where they were able to offer the scholars pre-packaged materials in a take-home format. They were able to have the family bonding experience of the STEAM activities at home. From an administrative perspective, we were on high alert, wanting to over-evaluate our every move to ensure that safety was our #1 priority, and scholars' social emotional health was a close second. But I think from the parent perspective, first and foremost, they were thrilled that we had an in-person program. They were extremely grateful, and they told us every day. And though the changes to the program were probably most noted with them, in a pre-COVID program, we would be very inclusive of our families. We would have them on campus multiple times a day. We would chat with them at drop-off and pick up. We'd have morning breakfast with them. We'd have them come in for our closing ceremonies, afternoon to come and see what we have done around camp. But in our COVID world last summer, we had really firm restrictions and we could not have adults on campus. Parents were not allowed out of their cars. They couldn't walk past the flagpole. It was really hard for them, especially those kinder families who really had to open their door and let us take their kindergartner from their car door and walk into the school with them. So we just had to really over communicate this past summer over and over and over again to families, and always leading that it is our priority is to keep your children safe. And that is why the health and safety protocols are in place. So scholar experience, not so much impacted. Families experience, the parent perspective was probably a little bit more impacted.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right, another question for Jennifer and Christine and Dolly. We all know how difficult this was to make happen last year. So my question for you is, what was the biggest challenge from your particular perspective in making it happen? So Christine, from a program leadership perspective, Dolly from an operational perspective, and Jennifer as a day-to-day administrator. Can you share both the challenge and how you overcame that challenge?
Great, thanks, Gina. I'll jump in first. So yes, the challenge for sure was, as I mentioned, with a collective impact project, having so many multiple partners and everybody having so many worries and fears, and there was just so much unknown at the time. So really the challenge was definitely from at the leadership level was holding on to that collective vision, holding on to our North Star, knowing what our families and our kids needed, and then trying to corral everybody around it in constant reassurance. Being able to be comfortable with the unknown. There were just so many unknowns for us. And when we think we would know something, the next day we wouldn't know it any longer because something had changed. And so the ability to be flexible, to be comfortable with that was key. And that was a definite learning. That was a challenge. I will share that I think what helped pull us through and what made this whole program possible was the years and years of relationships and trust that these organizations have built together. So not just the four backbone agencies that are working together closely, but also our relationship with the districts. So we have been able to build that level of trust, that open communication. So when we took the plunge and said we were going to go for it, people trusted us. They trusted that we would do it right, that we would come together, we would provide the resources they needed, we would be there when they called. And I'll say we needed to be. So if I got a call at 8 o'clock at night because somebody had just called in to say their grandma has COVID and somebody needs to miss something, I needed to pick it up. I needed to pick up the phone at 6 a.m. Or get in my car and I can drive thermometers and PPE and extra water cups because no other adults could come and do it. So that was just having that level of trust and engagement was key.
Thanks, Christine. And I remember those runs to get all the supplies. I mean, to add on to that, I think from the operational standpoint in coordinating the program, supplies were really difficult because we had a lot of delays through shipping for our program books, our materials due to COVID and just those restrictions. And I think, and luckily we were able to find a resource, eNASCO. They were helpful in providing more of our supplies in a rather quick manner. They're located in the Midwest, and so they were still able to get materials for us. And now also had staffing. I think that was a huge challenge because when we pivoted, we had already hired most of the staff in our program, and then things kept changing, program details kept changing. And on the other side of that, we had staff who were scared and nervous to work in person. So we had staff dropped out. Again, I mentioned we had typically recruited college-age interns. They were stuck in college. They couldn't actually come home. And so that was a challenge as well. And we also had issues with just the typical HR hiring requirements, which included fingerprinting and making appointments to have TB tests to work on site. But we did have the good thing about it is that the staff who were able to work in the program really wanted to work in the program. They were excited to do it, especially during this challenging year. And even on our staff surveys said it was the best year that they had worked because of not just overcoming the COVID challenges, but also being able to see how much their work in the program supported all of these students and the positive responses from our students. And so that was really important, definitely for our side.
So from a perspective that on the ground, kids are there, staff is there, and parents are there, there were definitely some challenges. Again, I would like to concur with everyone is saying is that the continually changing the plan to make it fit the new guidelines from a planner perspective was very challenging. It was nice to have a group alongside that could pivot easily. As the program lead, I knew I could count on my staff. The staff that was there, I knew that they wanted to be there. I knew they weren't going to change. I had them on my side. I had them on the kids' side. That was great. I know that the kids, they were going to be nimble. Mask wearing was very new at this stage. I didn't worry about that. I knew that they were going to be flexible with us. And I was right. They did a great job. My big question mark goes back to my other question too, was how are the families going to respond? I didn't know if the families were going to be able to follow the protocols. And when you're on a site with hundreds of kids, you and families are the big wild card. You need to make sure that you communicate to them what and why are the expectations. So I didn't know if the families were going to follow the rules. I didn't know how that kindergarten mom was going to let me take them, me a stranger, take them from their car and bring them into this building that they had never been into before. I didn't know if they were going to answer the COVID questions honestly. I didn't know if they were going to try to walk on campus and get their child. Were they going to linger after drop off and not follow the distance rules? So this is what kept me up at night. How am I going to control these families and let them know the reason we're doing it is obviously for the safety of their children? So we over communicated everything. And because we over communicated everything, it actually went flawlessly. Typically, we would have a meeting with the parents. We'd have them all come to a community hall. We'd tell them about the program. We'd do a Q&A. Obviously, that couldn't happen. So we turned to Zoom. And again, Zoom was still kind of fresh and new at the time. We had a parent meeting with all of our parents. I spoke with them and we did a Q&A session online. Then I thought it was important that the site administrators do a Zoom session with the families. And so we did that as well. And then what I thought was really important is many times because of the COVID restrictions, the families weren't actually ever going to see their child's teacher because the child's teacher at drop-off is inside the classroom And then we had one of the facilitators bringing the kids back and forth from the car to the classroom. So it was really important for me that the parents and the kids saw their teacher ahead of time and had an opportunity to chat with the teacher. So we did ask that all of our teachers Zoomed with the families. It was also important that the kids saw the teachers with their masks on prior to programming and with their masks off during programming, so that they would know who their teacher is, who they're going into this secret building with, and who they're going to be with for the majority of their day. We also did something at least at Jefferson Elementary School District, is we chose a theme for last summer, and our theme was Toy Story. And the main reason our theme was Toy Story is because the two main characters, Buzz and Woody, both wear face coverings. Buzz has his astronaut helmet and Woody has his cowboy helmet, or his cowboy handkerchief. And so we made sure on the first day of camp that all of our staff either was dressed as Buzz or Woody, something to kind of lessen the fears a little bit about wearing the mask. Again, it was very new. But because of all of our over planning and our over communicating, it really went flawlessly, actually. To my surprise, we worried about nothing, everyone, but it was really a great experience.
Thank you all. So Corinne and Christine, let's talk about the costs and the funding and how the pandemic impacted the costs of the program. Do you want to share a little bit how the program is funded and your plans for sustainability as well?
Yeah, thanks, Gina. So I think, first I'll talk about how the pandemic affected the costs. Last year, our costs did decrease. We weren't able to provide the program in all of our districts to the half-day extent that we were offering, and we weren't staffing a full-day program. So there were some efficiencies to be gained from that. I will say on the other side that throughout the pandemic, many activities are more expensive. Anything from assembling a kit of supplies, you've got staff spread out working more. Consider looking at this summer. There are regulations in place from the state of California and some best practices that are more expensive. I would say at the same time, there is an understanding that we knew we had a call to action and significant need in our county before. Now that need has just been deepened and is exacerbated by all of the pandemic effects. So there is an understanding that this work is important and that it's worth funding, even if it is more expensive. And so some of those costs have to do with adults assigned to work with child groups, and those ratios being 14 children to 2 adults. We have some additional costs that we're putting into place to address the need that has really surged during this time. And so, as we mentioned before, we're incredibly fortunate with the county and Measure K to have a significant funding provided to the program through that commitment and through the vision and leadership here in San Mateo County. In addition, in terms of sustainability, we have a few options. One is just our history of working together. And I would say all of us who've partnered together really believe in the program. And for many of us, we've incorporated elements of the program into the DNA of our own organizations. And we shoulder some costs ourselves. And certainly in the case of the library, libraries have always done a lot in the informal learning space, but this is just part of our core mission now. And it's something that we plan on supporting and reinforcing as the years go by. We are interested in the many opportunities that seem to be opening up nationally, in the state and locally, in terms of, this really seems to be the moment for out of school time learning, for summer learning, and there appear to be multiple pathways to pursue short-term and perhaps long-term funding for this type of work. And Christine, I'm sure you have additional comments.
Thanks, Corinne. I think you covered a lot of it. I would say in terms of costs for last summer, yep, on one hand, there were some savings because of the reduced program day and some of our district partners were not comfortable. There were increased costs, of course, but we really looked for opportunities to partner. We sourced a tremendous amount of our PPE that was needed through the county and through other available sources. So anywhere we could turn to find masks, thermometers, gloves, whatever we needed, we were applying for. We've always, as a program, been primarily funded by the County of San Mateo, but we've always continued to look for other opportunities to partner and maximize resources and get grants. So we continue to do that. One of the things that we did do last summer that was an increased cost for us that I don't think we've mentioned yet, but it was so worth every penny, is that I hired a nurse for every site. We don't need school nurses at summer camp. Typically, that for the 4 weeks or 5 weeks we have students, it's not usually an issue. But last summer, it just gave such peace of mind to our programs. We actually had very little real nursing that needed to happen during the school day, but our nurses became a trusted guide and a resource for all of our health and safety protocols. And so, yes, that was an additional investment to hire 7 nurses for the summer, but it was an absolutely worth it. And now, having done it for a year, when we go back this year, we still have health and safety protocols, but our programs are feeling so much more confident in their abilities. And we actually have access to a full-time nurse resource through our County Office of Education. So we're still going to have nursing support, but we don't need to make that investment. And that's sort of our path towards sustainability. As we make an investment 1 or 2 years to get ourselves comfortable and gain our own capacity, build our own capacity and gain our own skills, then we move forward using our own resources from there. So in looking back, yeah, it was expensive last summer on a per child basis, but it was worth every penny. And we learned a tremendous amount from the program. And we think we gave that back to the community.
Would you like to share what the per child cost was?
I'd have to go back to typically our per child cost average, it's about $1,600 in total per child for the full program. Corinne, I don't know if you have off the top of your head, we actually kept it pretty close to that. I think when I did the final run of the numbers, we were probably a little bit more like 1,700 per child. So it was surprisingly similar in cost. But we had a half-day program and there were a lot of other factors at play. And we reduced some of our curriculum costs because our priority last summer was to get students on campus, feeling comfortable there, feeling safe and secure, and their social emotional needs were our #1 priority on top of the safety. So we reduced some of our assessments and other curriculum focus, which helped us to save some dollars as well.
Thank you. I want to make sure we have time for Q&A from the audience. So I'm going to ask you all 2 last questions just to go around and share what were the high points for you last summer and what words of advice would you give to other communities who might be in the same situation, maybe not exactly the same, but what learnings can you share?
I'll start. For high points, from a community perspective, just the sheer joy from the kids every day getting out of the car, so happy to be there, so happy to go somewhere. And the gratitude from the families, same thing at drop off and pick up. They were just so grateful that we were willing to try this, that lots of other districts, counties, school districts weren't able to do quite yet. But more importantly, I think the fact that the Big Lift was the first program in the Bay Area to actually have an in-person student program during the pandemic. And I think as a district, as a county, as a community, we learned so much. Again, the kids had a fabulous time, of course, but I think that we didn't know where to start. Districts didn't know what was going to happen in the fall. We didn't even know how to tackle the problem. But the Big Lift Collaborative took the time to start. They tried it They tackled the problem from the detailed schedules to the walking paths for these 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds, to the cleaning the bathroom schedule, what temperature was going to be too high of a temperature. All the things we know now was very useful to start planning for the fall. And I think so many of our staff were nervous to come fall, but as soon as you talk to a BLIS staff member that had just done it for 4 and 5 weeks, it made our regular school year staff so much more comfortable to know that there was actually a starting point for the fall. So besides the kids having just a delightful time, I think from an adult staff perspective, the high point is that we did it, and we did it successfully.
I would also, just to piggyback on that, Jen, for me, it really was the family feedback that we received. I have pages and pages full of positive comments, just receiving the STEM kits themselves, that there was something new and interactive, and that they did together and their experiences with that, but also just being able to have their child on campus. One of our families had written to us and let us know that their child was really sad. When school shut down, they were really sad. They were kind of not interested in anything. And then after camp, man, she was so excited and so happy, and she made all these friends. And so that, just hearing that and knowing that that was repeated throughout many families in the program was very powerful. And our staff saw it too. Our staff were very appreciative of the program. They felt very safe, and they thought that it was very well planned out. And so just knowing that we were successful that way was a very big highlight, because it really was, it was a big team effort to make it happen. And we worked by that backbone, as I call it, every day, just to help anyone with anything. So I think our responsiveness was just key to making that successful.
Yeah, I think it was really, the high point was that everyone felt so good about what we did. And, you know, people were scared. Some were even terrified, I would say. And it felt like people were putting their lives in our hands, and everyone was safe. And at the end of it, people shared these moving stories about how much participating in the experience meant to them, whether they were overseeing a site, whether they were working directly with the kids, or whether they were the kids themselves and the families. And in terms of words of advice, I would just say that what we do now matters. And, you know, arguably what we do now matters more than it has ever mattered in any past year. So, you know, to the extent we can be brave and know that in terms of people understanding the importance of out of school time and summer learning, people are listening in ways they have rarely done in the past. And we have such a tremendous opportunity ahead of us together.
Great. I'll just finish up with, one high point for me was the watching the amazing teamwork and the hard work and the courage of all of the staff. And then having gotten to the end of, it stretched over 5 weeks. So there were 4-week programs, but stretched over the 5 weeks with all of our districts. And at the end of 5 weeks, we didn't have a single case of COVID that happened at our camp. So not a single staff member or child camper got COVID. We had cases, contact of cases and whatnot, but we never. And so it was so amazing for me to look at the incredible work of our program and our staff and how hard everybody worked and jumped in, and know that they did it. These kids got something amazing. And for many of them, it was the only in-person class time they had until just a few weeks ago. And so for some, we serve rising kindergartners. This was their entry to their elementary school experience. This is the first time they'd gone to the big kid school and walked onto that campus. And so I can't tell you how proud I am of our staff and our programs that they created this really positive environment for all of these kids. So that's been really the high point. In terms of things, words of advice, go for it, be bold, be courageous. You can do it. We have lots of resources that I know you probably all have them in your own districts as well by now in your own programs, but we have a full 40-page health and safety manual with everything you could possibly think of under the sun that we talk about. We have daily schedules, we have all kinds of things. So we are happy to share any of those resources with the community. We're happy to show you the type of curriculum we use so you're familiar with it, whatever you need. And I think, Gina, we can move to questions.
Well, actually, before we move to questions, thank you all. I'd like to ask Corinne and Dolly to share your plans for summer 2021, just around the corner.
Yes, so it is coming right up, and our plan is to do more of what we know works. You know, it sort of seems like, yeah, of course, that's a foregone conclusion at this point. But when we were planning, it really wasn't obvious. We were in a very different place in the pandemic. The students had not been back to campus at all. And so when we were trying to think about what did we really want to advance as the best thing we could offer for kids this summer, knowing the kinds of issues that have been really rising at worrisome rates as we've gone through this pandemic, we settled on the idea that we could go forward with a full day in-person program. We had this remarkable success last summer with the half-day in-person program, and we didn't want to hold steady with that. We wanted to move forward and do even more. And so that is what we're going to do. We worked with our districts and with all of our stakeholders, and with, again, the very committed leadership from the county. We are offering a full day in-person program. It is going to be an additional week. So we've added a 5th week back to really come into line with the best outcomes for youth that we know comes with a minimum of a 5-week program. We are providing more slots to serve even more youth. We're holding those ratios down and really having that nice intimate number of youth to students to ensure the best learning outcomes. And we're adding an additional grade this summer, the rising 3rd graders. We're focusing intensively on our rising kindergartners, who we know have suffered so much during this time period. And we'll be implementing and assessing supplemental math and phonics resources for them. And we're going to continue our close communication with families, making sure we have that one-on-one time to provide support and encouragement and problem solve together. And we will continue with updated safety guidelines for all of our sites, working closely with the Office of Education and our dedicated medical staff to ensure that we're in full compliance with best practices and that everyone can feel completely safe and secure this summer, know that we'll provide a healthy environment, and so that people can just focus on being together, learning how to be together in groups, feeling safe, and working on some of these great experiences to carry kids through for a lifetime of great success.
Thank you, Corinne. All right, and now we will open it up to Q&A from the audience. I captured a few that came in through the Q&A box in the chat box. And so I'm gonna just start with some of those, but otherwise feel free to add more questions as they come. So Christine, first question I will share to you, and if anyone else would like to answer, that is fine as well. One of the questions is reading proficiency in 3rd grade inclusive of students reading in their family language, such as Spanish or other, or is it English only? So many kids in San Mateo County are bilingual.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So many kids in San Mateo County are speaking multiple languages. And as part of the BLIS, we fully encourage strengthened home language use. So we are, really excited to encourage that and help families to continue to read and speak their home language at home as the kids develop their English proficiency when they move into the pre-K and on up through elementary school. Our reading scores for 3rd grade, the way we measure reading is, we were just about to have our first 3rd grade cohort and with the standardized state test scores last spring when those tests were postponed or canceled. So we actually do not have our first opportunity to have 3rd grade reading scores. Up until 3rd grade, we measure reading with the Fontes and Pinnell reading scores. And so that's done in English in there. Most of our programs are in English.
Christine, you actually jumped into my second question, which was about data and assessment and evaluation. And just to make sure that we answered the question, or that you answered it, The question was, how do you know the Big Lift is working? What research or evaluation partnerships do you have? What access to school level data for students that participate in the Big Lift? And what are the student results? Are your surveys and questionnaires and pre and post assessment measures open to anyone who wants to use them to benchmark and compare results? That's quite a few questions.
It's a lot of questions, so I'll try to start, and then you'll have to make sure that I get them covered. So we have partnered from the beginning with RAND as our external evaluation partner. And so from the outset of the Big Lift, we set up a data collection systems and an evaluation system. And so that has been one of the strengths of the program, is we set that up from the beginning, and we structured it so that we could continuously collect data. We have all of the RAND public reports are available through the RAND website and also through our Big Lift website. I must say we're in the midst of doing some work on our Big Lift website. So if you pop in and they aren't there then immediately, they will be up shortly. And so RAND has been evaluating. And just thinking about one of the things we have, another part of that question was, how did we get data? We have data sharing agreements with all of our school districts. And this was a lot of work, definitely a lot of work to get set up at the beginning, but highly recommend it for anyone who's doing a program. It was worth it. So all of our districts agree as part of the program to collect certain data, and then they share it with us. And we have a data team that works at the County Office of Education that takes care of all that data. And then we crunch it, we look at it, we learn from it, but we also then send it off to RAND, who does their external analysis from it. How do we know that it is working? For kindergarten readiness, we opted to use the Bergantz as our kinder readiness measurement. Our research is showing, so most recent research, that our students who attend 2 years of high quality Big Lift preschool are 22 percentage points more likely to be ready for kindergarten than students who, similar demographic students that do not attend preschool. So we're really seeing some impact there. Unfortunately, we don't have a 3rd grade score yet, like I mentioned, so we're working on that. But what we have done in our most recent evaluation, our data is indicating that it looks like we're seeing some impact from our layering of services. So kids who attend preschool and kids who attend summer programs, we are going to be releasing that data shortly, but we're seeing some positive trends there, which is really exciting, because that was our theory of change, was that one of these by themselves was not going to do it. We needed to layer services together, and that actually is showing impact. Now, did I answer all of the questions, Gina, or am I missing some?
I think you did a fantastic job of answering all.
Oh, somebody asked if it was publicly available. Well, the Bergantz is definitely a tool that can be purchased. And Fontes and Pinnell. The Bell in our summer, our screenings, that's all purchased with our Bell curriculum and our contract with Bell. So all of those things are available to the public, but we partner with our partners and purchase them. So
I will also add an additional commentary to that question was about the value for other summer learning programs such as Boys and Girls Club to compare results and benchmark their successes. And one thing we did not mention actually is we have part of our collective impact approach is that we actually have community collaboratives in each school district. And the intention of that is to have conversations about data and engage with community groups, other service providers, other people who touch families and children in that community to share the data and look at what other resources or interventions do we need, what other gaps there might be. So that's an area that we're continuing to build out, and we don't work directly with other summer program providers like the Boys and Girls Club, although many of our campuses will share sort of programming. So in Redwood, in 2 of our school districts, we provide the Rising Kindergartners Summer Inspiring Summers program, and then Boys and Girls Club will serve the Rising First and Up grades And I believe it's the same case with the YMCA is on some of our other campuses as well, serving older grades. So there's definitely opportunity. And as Corrine said, out of school time is becoming more and more part of the conversation. And even in our county, we are looking more at how we can coordinate our efforts around that. I want to make sure we answered some of the other questions. I know there was a question about community partnerships. I believe Dolly answered that. We discussed the cost per student at around, it was $1,600. It was about $1,700-1,800 this past year. And we're trying to keep it stable. One of the other questions came up was around how did we get funding for the nurses? Christine, do you want to respond to that? Or
we carved funding for the nurses out of the existing budget. As we said, we had some savings in other parts of the budget. And so we just reallocated, we had some, because we didn't have full-time afternoon staff as much, we were able to shift some of the funding over to that. And we used, in terms of finding the school nurses, you know, it differs across the country. California does not typically have school nurses in all our schools by any stretch. So we had to be fairly creative about finding our nurses. And we used some that were based in school districts. We used some that were more countywide nurses that work in different programs throughout the year. But we were also able to use some funding that were savings in other parts of the Big Lift throughout the year. So we were able to find little pockets here and there to make it happen. We get very creative in trying to find where we can find money, since we have a very limited amount of what we have to work with, and we have lots of work to do with it. So we're always looking for ways that we can leverage other funding, find savings here or there. And again, that's part of going, I often go back to the point of trust and open communication, because we are all these different agencies contributing and working hard at it. And so everybody's very open about where we can pitch in, where we can find extra. And that really makes the difference.
Thank you. I believe Dolly answered a question about the intern qualifications in the chat. So that has been answered as well. Another question I think was about when does the program start? And that too, I believe, was answered somewhere that and Christine mentioned it. The preschool program is year round for 3 and 4 year olds. And then summer is Rising K through Rising 3rd. One other question I saw in here is, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's getting at attendance in summer, but it says for kids that attend at least 60% of summer days or 85% of summer days, what is the engagement benchmark that is used? Does someone want to talk about attendance in the summer program?
I can say that.
Or just a clarification question, if Caitlin Mack wants to clarify that question, make sure we answer it. Go ahead, Corrine.
I mean, especially with the shorter program, we do want the kids and the families to commit to attending the full program, and so we've had different supports in place to, you know, follow up if there are youth who are missing some days of the program, but the goal is really to have the youth present for the 5 weeks of the program, and so that is what we've worked towards. And I don't know if you want to add anything else, Dolly. I think that.
I mean, I would just say we do get questions a lot of times like, oh, my child can come for 2 weeks. Is that okay? And we tell them no, that the program builds on itself. So if they come in halfway through, they won't understand what's going on with the themes and the curriculum of the program. And as well as with the assessment, they have to take the pre-assessment and post to really measure gains in the program. So we do kind of stress that the 5 weeks full attendance.
Yes, I see a clarification I agree. The attendance is very much stressed during summer, although last year was a very odd year where any change in the news, any change in a family's life situation We had a lot of dropouts, I think, as well, and attendance issues last year, but it was an odd year for sure. Let's see, if there are any other questions, I invite them now. Otherwise, I think we may have answered. All the questions that I saw, and if I missed any, please feel free to let me know. All right, I guess not. Well, thank you all very much for having us today. It was a pleasure sharing the Big Lift. We're very proud of it.
Thank you, Gina, and thanks to all of you. I just want to say, reflecting back as you discuss your program, it's even though we're not anywhere back to what we would maybe consider normal, it's still easy to forget how scary and how many unknowns there were right at the time you were making the decision to do this in-person programming. And so it's just so inspiring and really amazing that you chose to do this and offered such an incredible program for the kids in the county. And so I thank you, first of all, for just doing that. It's wonderful to hear about all of the children and families whose lives were impacted by this program last summer. And also really appreciate so much that you took the time to share with us and inspire us and inform us about ways that your summer program worked so well last summer and your plans for this summer. So Gina, Christine, Dolly, Karine, and Jennifer, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And everyone on the call, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll hope to see you at an upcoming webinar. There's one at 3 today, Family Resource Centers, Key to Supported Families and Thriving Communities. Next week, we'll have a funder to funder conversation and a Learning Loss Recovery Challenge webinar. And the following Tuesday, we'll have a partner webinar about engaging business leaders as multifaceted champions for grade level reading. So a lot of wonderful topics coming up, and hope to see you on another webinar soon. Have a good afternoon, everyone.